Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Maps Are Dead with Mike D. Real live, unscripted conversations about how we can use our Clifton strengths to navigate the world. This is based on Maps Are Dead, is this idea that in a world that's kind of run off the map, a map only works if people have all been exactly where you want to go. And so what if a map stops working? Or what if you're looking at the map wrong, you're holding it wrong? Well, they have to orient some way. And so you need an internal compass. And so how do you make decisions when no one else can tell you what to do is what we do. We talk about Clifton strengths. I am very excited to have he's a client, but become a friend. It's been many, many years now. I always say Amol, like pronounce your last name for me. Pronounce it the real way. I say Dhargalkar, but I'm like, how would you say it if you were really going to say it well?
Am I saying it in India? Because if I'm saying it in
Indian
India,
way, say it the proper way.
It's Dhargalkar.
Dhargalkar. Amol Dhargalkar.
But let's go with Amol Dhargalkar.
Oh.
That's enough.
My brother Amol and I have been clients and friends. We worked with myself and the Dauphinee group. But here's the thing I love about Amol is that he's very well respected. He is the managing partner and chairman of the board for Chatham Financial. Chatham is one of the most one of the most out there and busy and growing financial risk advisory firms in the world. Now, Amol, you've had to be on Bloomberg and BBC and Squawk Box. This will be an easy conversation for you. I'm kind of not really at that bar.
But don't sell yourself short, Mike. This is going to be way deeper than any of those.
I'm going to ask different questions. Amol spends most of his days advising large corporations, how to navigate risks in the market and all of those crazy things. So for the rest of us, you may just watch the news and kind of be like, what exactly is the financial state of the world and what happens when the Strait of Hormuz closes? People are calling up Amol and all of his friends and fellow workers at Chatham, and they're being asked to navigate some of that. Thanks for making time for me today, brother. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Happy to do it.
We always like to lead off with Clifton strengths. So if people are watching, you can see I got them scribbled in my serial killer handwriting on the board behind me. But if you're listening along at home, developer, positivity, arranger, learner, and empathy are Clifton strengths themes. So we've got some relational themes in there with some empathy and some of that positivity developer, but you've also got learner, thinking theme, and arranger. So we'll talk through some of those pieces. You actually have been 20 years at Chatham. Like your professional career has basically been at Chatham. Is that right?
Yeah, 25 actually.
25.
I have not. I like to joke. This is my first place that I've ever worked, and it'll probably be the last place that I ever work. Not a common experience when I think about my other friends.
Well, and at time now too, as I say, because what can be interesting is saying, well, Mike, you're talking to a guy who hasn't navigated out of his job. How's he navigating? But I would say that navigating loyalty and staying is as much of a navigation as in a world we're constantly moving. You're not. What for you helped you make the decision to go, you know what, I'm going to lock in on this. This is going to be a large portion. Again, and you've got many years of your career to come and many iterations, and you have other things in your life. You have a family and other causes and things you care about beyond just Chatham. But Chatham's been a major part of that. When it comes to navigating and deciding, hey, I'm going to anchor in here and I'm going to ride this. You're chairman of the board now. How did you come to that conclusion that it wasn't, I should strike out again and again? Because I'm sure that opportunity has come up many times.
Yeah. And, I've thought about this for a while because it's so unusual to stay at a place for so long. And I think the answer is really simple. And it actually goes back to some of my strengths. As long as I felt like I was growing and doing different things and with people that I care about, I have wanted to stay here. It's not that complicated. One of the things that I learned, when I started, we were about 20 some odd people, Mike, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I think for the first 5 years of my career, I was the last undergrad that Chatham hired for 5 years. So I was the youngest guy in the company for 5 years. And, which is a little bit sobering. You're like, wow, have I been that bad that you just stopped hiring?
They decided undergrads were no longer valuable. Let us.
But really what was interesting to me was I just got to know so many people who had been through so many different other experiences in their life. People who came from the military, who came from business school, had worked at multiple other places. And at some point, it just dawned on me that, one, this is a special and unique place. Two, I have an opportunity, as long as I keep performing, to actually shape it into the kind of company and culture that I want it to be. And again, three, back to, is it fulfilling? I was growing. I kept doing different stuff. And it was with people that I really enjoyed spending time with, whether that's inside the walls or outside the walls of the firm. And in some weird way, the decision points every time they've come up have been super easy because I just kept coming back to that as my compass and saying, hey, am I learning? Am I growing? Is this the kind of place with the kind of people that I want to be doing things? Are we making an impact on the world? And if every time the answer comes back yes, I say, well,
Yeah,
why go do something different if I
right.
really enjoy this?
And I mean, it's so funny saying, yeah, and you're absolutely right. That's a developer one, right? Like developers know how to grow and they develop things and grow things. And we'll often say when I get calls or the team gets calls to change jobs, they want coaching or just any advisory, it's almost always because, man, I just don't see how I'm growing anymore, or I've stopped growing, or I'm going backwards. And so the variety of things that Chatham does, I'm sure, has given you to go from, hi, I'm an undergrad hire to I'm chairman of the board. There's a lot of growth that occurs in that space. But it's funny too, like I like that you have that perspective because Gallup did some research on state of the global workplace. And one of the takeaways they're finding is that people, even beyond salary, will stay in roles that they believe will provide growth towards some professional dream they have. If they think this will get me to grow towards something, I may make more money over there, but I will stay because I'm going to grow more towards a different vision I have. Does that resonate with what you guys are hearing as far as staff?
Yeah, I think it does. And I mean, money is important. People need to be
Absolutely.
compensated and valued. And that's one way that people derive, a self perception of value. But meaning carries so much more weight at the
Yeah.
end of the day, and, both for myself and for everyone that I've seen the hundreds of people that work at Chatham and the thousands that I've seen be here over time for parts of their career and move on to other places. Meaning is what really makes the biggest difference. People who have that sense of meaning, they dive in and dig in really deep. And even if they're only here for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, the impacts they make live on for a long time.
Yeah. The people, that people element of it. I mean, you did, your undergrad was chemical engineering and economics at Penn State and
Yep.
then Wharton.
Yeah.
And so was that always the path? I mean, I mean, I didn't really know until I started digging. I'm like, chemical engineering, Amol, really? Would that kind of like keep your options open? Let me do economics and chemical engineering and see what hits? I mean, or was that intentional?
No, so I started as chemical engineering because, I was a good, good Indian kid growing up in Jersey. My dad was a chemical engineer and I liked science and math and I
Okay.
happened to be good at them. So what do? You do engineering.
Do what you know.
But maybe I've told you this, but I had an internship one summer at Lucent Technologies, if anybody
Yeah.
still remembers that name. And I worked for this guy. His name was Dick Sadai, and his counterpart at Lucent, on like the literal other side of the hall of this cubicle farm. Well, he had a corner office, but the rest of us were in
Please, when I worked
cubicles.
at HP, we had cubes.
Yeah, exactly. His counterpart was this woman, Carly Fiorina. That's a name that a lot of people
I was
have heard.
literally going to ask if you knew that because I worked at HP when she got hired over, and they used to say everybody said she was at Lucent at the time when she came to
Yes.
HP. She
Yeah.
came 6 months
So
after me.
I
Yeah,
was in one meeting. She will never remember me.
me
I
neither.
was in one meeting with her,
Yep, me too.
saw how she operated. But it was actually, it was my first time. It wasn't really a engineering internship, Mike. It was I mean, these guys were doing like, Latin American business development and
Mhm.
opening new markets and all this stuff. And I had never really thought about what businesses do or how they actually go about doing some of these things. And what I realized, the itch that it scratched for me was beyond the technical. I was like, oh, this is really interesting stuff. And so I got an econ degree while I was at Penn State, and I was fortunate enough to know some of the early employees at Chatham. Somehow they convinced our founder to give me a job here. I had no idea what we did. I'm still shocked that I got the job because I didn't know anything about derivatives or financial markets or capital markets or anything like that. But what I remember was one time we were talking about the Black-Scholes equation, which is, how you price options and
Okay.
derivatives. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, this isn't that hard. This is like fluid flow dynamics in my chemie class that I took. And it was at that moment where I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know this, but I know things like this. Or
Systems
I've
and
proven the
theories and
ability to
interconnections.
learn things like this. And so, maybe I could be pretty good at this. So, but yeah, so I wouldn't say it was a plan. It would be incredibly disingenuous to say that 20 years ago I wrote, or 30 years ago, I wrote, this is the plan for my life and this is how it turned out. But I always knew I wanted to do things that were hard and challenging that kept me growing. And that
Would you say?
opportunity I've had.
Because I was gonna say, would you say that it's interesting? Because it's like you're like, okay, I'm gonna start with a theory, and then I'll test it and follow the relationships that go with it.
That's about it. Yeah.
Because you really do,
Yeah.
do the relationship. I mean, again, you start with my relationship with my father is what I know, and then I go and I'm good at it. Let me go into the testing this. And these relationships are here and I step into that. Do you ever find that humanity part of you, because you have such relational themes in a space where, I mean, risk management, you're advising people on how to manage their financial risks. Corporations, you've done the biggest corporate names in the world, the biggest funds, you guys support all of them. In fact, I remember my very first use of teaching my team how to use ChatGPT way back was to like, guys, this is Chatham Financial. Somebody asked ChatGPT to teach them about hedge accounting. And it's like, Mike, imagine you have a lemonade stand and you need to buy lemons. That was one of our first uses. And so all of us are out here learning. I'm like, okay, hedge accounting is one of the many things that go into this and this and this that Chatham Financial does. So it's a lot of numbers and engineering, but you are very relational in that space. How has that served you when others will say, well, the numbers are here? You bring a very different voice. I've said it from the first time I met you and the leadership team in 2022 that you brought a different voice. Has that ever served you and ever gotten in the way for you as a professional?
I think you taught me those strengths. If you dial them to 11, they'll definitely become the things that bring you down.
Less strength.
Yeah, I mean, so let me start with where it's brought me down. It's been hard when you have to make decisions that impact people. I mean, among the hardest decisions that we have to make as leaders are ones that will have an impact on somebody's livelihood. And that is really, to say that is energy draining probably doesn't even begin to do it justice, right? And because it weighs on you, no matter how clinical you want to be and how much you want to make it about numbers in an Excel spreadsheet, it is ultimately it's people and their lives that we're impacting. But I think that same, as difficult as that has been, it's also what leads me to listen to everyone around me, in a way that I've joked that I'm not the smartest person in the room. What I am really good at is listening and understanding and picking out the information from everybody around to figure out, okay, what do we do next? Where do we go forward from here? How do we articulate this? And so I have some extreme levels of patience for lots of input and insight from everybody around me, which I think is really led by that relational aspect of my personality.
Yeah. So what I love about, again, I'm biased. I love your profile and that I always wish I had developer and you have connectedness in your top 10, which I really wish I had too. Ultimately, what's so fascinating to me is I had somebody say to me the other day, in a world where information and data is free, understanding human beings becomes gold. And we live in a world where data is available to everybody. The PhD is in your pocket. Yeah. Knowing how the human being is reacting and why they're reacting and the emotional response and the fear that they respond to with information, that is something that we've not yet found artificial intelligence to be able to manage. And I feel like it's moving, the world is shifting in that direction where there is more ability to go, but how will the human react to the data? Are there leaders who get that? Do you feel a premium in that and tapping into that in yourself now?
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but I think the way I've seen it happen for me is really making sure that I actually get to know the people that I'm working with. Because when people feel safe, this, one of the traits that I value most in the people I work with is when they're willing to tell me that I'm wrong. It doesn't mean they're right, but having a willingness to tell me that I'm wrong to my face without mincing the words and just saying, hey, you haven't thought about X, Y, and Z. That makes me trust the people so much more. But in order to even get to that point where we can have that conversation, I've learned that, I want to go around thinking that I'm still the, 22-year-old analyst that came in from Penn State that doesn't know a thing. That's not quite how people treat me sometimes or oftentimes. People need to feel safe and they need to know that you care about them, that you know about them, and not care about them for some end other than I just care about you. I care about your development. I care about your growth. I care about you as a person. I care about whatever you're trying to achieve in your life. And what I found is it just makes for a much better team environment and ultimately a much more effective team environment. You get better information, better decisions, and you actually get to the point where you can make those decisions more aligned and faster when the people around you know you care about them and that they care about you as well.
I heard a podcast over the weekend from Anton Levy, who was being interviewed a number of years ago, and one of his key things, like, what are some rules for success for their fund when he's at GA? And not rocket science. We really discovered that people really like to work with people they like.
Yeah.
And he kind of said, he's like, it's not that rocket sciencey. And that was years ago. And I'm like, and I liked that because that's what I hear from you even. But I said this at a conference last week. Actually, I saw this small group, and there was an argument that kind of came up, and I was in my feeling my oats moment, as my grandmother would say. I said, in the days of AI, the days of being a really, really smart, best in class, intelligent a-hole are over, because artificial intelligence is going to be nicer to me than you. There used to be a time when you could afford to be the smartest person in the room, and we would tolerate it because you had data and insight no one else had. And I feel like leaders who don't get that those days are over, then I'm like, guess what? I can get that insight or that information, that research 20 places. But to do it in a way that doesn't blow out the humanity, that is okay with growing people around them, I feel like people keep saying to me, oh, I have the non-leadership traits. I have all the relational ones. And I'm going, the future belongs to you then. Stop sitting around in some ways.
Yeah, I think I feel like you just have to make of it. You have to be your authentic self and just make the best of the situation, whatever the situation that comes up. You know, I have found that some of my strengths are very annoying to others.
Totally.
Positivity, definitely. Before we started recording, I was telling you about how my wife broke her foot last week, which is not fun. And you've met my wife, and it's really hard for her. And I have to really hold back.
It's gonna be okay, honey. It's gonna be all right.
Exactly.
Like, I cannot move. This is not okay. I'm the same as like, it's going to be great. You're like, really? Shut up, Mike.
Yes. And I've been, I've been just saying, okay, you know what? There's a lot I can do. I can support, I can do all the things. I just need to not say, hey, look, it's going to be great. And I just, I found even in this conversation, I'm reflecting on it. I rely actually on my developer strengths where it's like, let's just focus on one day.
Better, just a little better.
Just one day, right? Let's get through today. Let's figure out the plan for today and let's get through it. And then we'll talk about tomorrow, and then we'll talk about the next day. But whether that's in our personal lives or at work, like I think those skills are true. Partly because I think AI is also going to lead to already has led to such massive human disruption. I think what we've seen to date is nothing compared to what we're going to see in the next maybe even 3 years. People do still want to do business with other people. They want to work with other people. And while I think each person will be more productive than ever before, at some level, like people also, we're all social. Like we want to be able to be in a room with other people doing things. We learned this from COVID that matter and with people that care about them. And so I think that premium is going to be there, has always been there, but I suspect in the AI, and especially as we transitioned into the AI, where AI and agentic workforces start to come into play, like it's going to matter even more. And who knows if our agents end up starting to have personalities, then it might be a whole other.
It's a whole other conversation. I'm sure eventually they will. It'll come to that. But I think you're absolutely right. I had lunch with a VP of he's basically a VP of a holding company that for a PE group is putting together a portfolio, and he's one of the acquisition VPs. And we were talking through using Cowork, which is Claude's new Cowork, and had the agentic functions internally. And he was like, man, I'm just shifting over. And I'm like, well, you know what? Hey, dive into Cowork like this. And we were just going back and forth on tactics and things. And I was like, oh yeah. And Cowork for PowerPoint came up, you're one. He's like, wait, you really connected? I'm like, oh yeah, I give it my brand. And he sat there across lunch and was like, oh my God, our analysts are done. Like in his mind, he realized, because for him, he realized, like, he said to me, he's young, he's probably 32. He's like, I learned my world by having to do slide deck after slide deck after slide deck for all the senior partners and them being mad about how I didn't create it. He's like, that's how I learned. He's like, if I can do it quicker and literally have Cowork do my deck for me now and not have to have it, he's like, how are they going to learn? How are they going to step into that?
I mean, my story is the same. I remember the way I learned derivatives was I built models in Excel. And then even as our company grew, you didn't have to do that because we built models that you didn't have to just make it. Yeah. And I always used to lament that. But what I found, is interesting is that the people who want to learn take advantage of whatever is in front of them to learn. When they're put in this situation, they kind of start from scratch. And my personal experience has been this many times over. I've learned so many new things that I never had any prior knowledge of before. I mean, we can jokingly say I've been at one company my whole life. There are, even before AI, there was lots of ways to learn. You could talk to people outside of your field. Now it's easier than ever with AI. I'm working on, if even a few hours goes by that I'm not using ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or something to learn more about the thing that I'm focused on, that would be shocking because I'm just able to get up the curve faster. It's not the same way as as this VP was saying, where like you're doing the nuts and bolts work, but you can get a flavor of it. And then when you have the experience, at least you're not starting totally blind, which
Yeah.
is what this analyst usually is starting with. They have no idea what the
Right.
output is required or
Yeah.
what the ultimate goal is. But now you can get so much more context and insight before you even start doing any work.
And I think it's, and I mean, not to hammer the relational themes again, but I think it is going to be if I'm an analyst starting out, would you say, my brain goes, number one thing is get really good at building relationships with people, because because if I'm not going to get to build the deck, I am going to have to hunt for opportunities. Relationships are going to matter. Like, it's going to matter even more where I can go that, well, if there is an open spot, after the world resets and we realize, okay, analyst, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is one of the most, it's not entry level, but it is kind of like a real early space in your industry, specifically in finance. You're an analyst for something specific, and you then navigate in and grow up and advise in different areas. So an analyst in some ways is like the first level, which when OpenAI announced they hired 5,000 JP Morgan Chase analysts, bankers to teach their system the analyst job in an effort to create agentic. They just announced that a year ago, I think it was, right? That's going to replace those roles. Well, then we're going to need relationships then to navigate into other entry points into the industry, if that's right.
Yeah, that's right. I think currently I would say the biggest thing that if you're an undergrad that you could be doing is just networking. And I don't think anyone teaches how to do this. There's not like a class you can take in school. My biggest advice on networking, it might be, I don't know how others think about it, but I think of it as if you start a relationship with the pure express purpose of just trying to get something out of it, you're not going to get very much out of it. And I start every conversation, I try to start every networking or not, whatever you want to call it, is just a relationship of like, hey, I want to get to know you. I want to share a little bit what I do, what we do, and how we might be able to work together. But like, really, if nothing comes out of that first conversation other than we got to know one another and I heard an interesting story about the car that you're rebuilding, or you heard about my marathon running, like that's cool. Like I'm not looking for, a transactional relationship. I'm looking for something long-term with the people in my life. And so, that's a tough skill, especially when you're 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. But that has always been a big part of it for me, is just you want to get to know people as they are, and you want to be yourself as much as you can be.
And I think it's good advice in that we should focus in on what it is we contribute to each other. That generosity of like, people love to be seen, no matter who they are in companies. If we think they're fancy and advanced, like a chairman of the board or an analyst, we all like to be seen. I'll tell people interviewing for roles, hey, Mike, what's the mindset? How do I go in for a better interview? And we say, set a vision for who you want to be. Now I'll say to them, what if you set a vision for being the most positive, encouraging, curious person they're going to meet all day? This interviewer is going to have to talk to a whole bunch of people. They're screening candidates for a summer program. You could be the bright. And so setting that intention of who it is you want to be, not just what I want to take from you, or I hope you pick me. Instead going, this is a chance for them to meet someone they like. I love watching film critics who are on junkets interviewing stars who are like, I'm going to be the least boring interview you're going to have. Because they do those interviews, movie stars do back-to-back interviews. And every now and then you find these weird, like I call them the weirdos, but the guy's like, I have a journal that I've kept since I was 12 on all the movies I've been to. And Tom Cruise is going, show me your journal. And it's the ability of showing up, trying to bring something to the moment and being able to build that relationship of going, hey, it's a relationship. Even if it's a cup of coffee, I'm going to be curious and respectful and have this person feel seen. I think it's a key to even just networking, if we're going to still call it that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I don't know what we should call it. It might be just making friends. It might be that simple.
I think actually, again, we're back to be a friend, make a friend. Yeah. But here's the other part though. And in the other area that you're in, it's so interesting. So much of, we always talk, Gallup talks about 5 areas of well-being. They talk about professional/purpose. So that's your career. Financial. Are you living below your means or above your means? Do you have enough money to manage your finances in your life? Physical, do you have enough energy to live your life? Relational, do you have loving relationships, both family, personal, friends? Social, are you around community and people that feed into your life? And so they say this collectively makes overall well-being. But what's interesting is when I get asked to talk to people in the financial space, there's a lot of fear around, I don't want to make the wrong choice. What's interesting to me is that you live in a world where legitimately there is no right and wrong single answer. Like, when people ask you for your advice, right? There's rarely, this is the single thing and I will live and die by this is the one answer. How in 20 years do you go from advising clients at the early levels or advising bosses on this is what I think is the right answer to protect this client to, to where you are now, where you guys are literally at a level of you're literally hired because there isn't a single thing that can guarantee this will protect you should we suddenly decide to bomb Portugal tomorrow or some crazy place or some other thing. Like, there's some extreme global event where like, oh, another volcano and there's ash and we can't fly over X, Y, and Z. Like, these are the factors that play out in your actual world.
Yeah,
there's no right or wrong.
No, there isn't right or wrong. I think a big part of it is you have to do the work, to even earn the right to be in that room with that client. You have to be truly, our view has always been we have to be truly excellent at what we do. There's no shortcuts to that. Once we've done the work, a lot of it comes down to how you understand what the client is trying to accomplish and how you communicate the choices in front of them. At the end of the day, we can make recommendations all we want, but if it's our client's money, it's our client's money. And I've seen it, being on the other side when people are recommending things that we should do at Chatham. I'm like, yeah, but it's our money. So I like the recommendations, but we are the ones that are going to own the ultimate outcome here. But again, do the work, listen and ask questions, but then how to effectively communicate it is absolutely critical so that who you're in the room with can make a good decision. And part of that is actually standing up and saying, you should do X, or making some type of a strong recommendation saying, I've been in your situation. I understand your situation. I've seen your situation 1,001 times. And of those 1,001, 150 of them do X for these reasons. And 51 of them do Y for these reasons. I think you're in the 950 and here's why. Or I think you're in the 51 and here's why. I think that's absolutely a critical part of this whole thing. And again, it comes back to you have to do the analysis, you have to do the work, and you have to know the person and the organization that you're working with to be able to make that kind of recommendation.
I want to ask about where that confidence comes from, but what you just called out as a great model, I think, for people is that one, I think you have to believe that you have the capacity to make a good decision. So if people are following along at home and you're like, how do you make decisions in a moment where there isn't a right answer, especially in finances even? One, you have to believe that you have to that you're the person who can make the call. Two, you really have to be able to listen and go, for you, you're going, what does the customer really want? And how well am I listening to what is the actual risk they're afraid of? I think we actually have to get clear on what we really want in finance and other places. Like, what do I really want? And then relationally go, I'm not doing that in a vacuum. How does that impact my life? How does that, the relationships? I have to be listening for it in those spaces. Can you spot in your own story, if you think back, where the biggest moments of that confidence? Because you've been the person in the room at lower levels. Now you're doing bigger things. You're at the board level and you're navigating strategy and vision and long-term planning. And, you're still in the day-to-day, but you've had seasons, right? Where you were an analyst at some point. Do you recognize when the confidence of that, which is very clearly something you live out. It's a very clear thing that you're describing. Do you know when it changed? Do you remember moments when you're like, I really think it took root in me here?
I've had lots of instances where, where I've, had to figure out who I was going to be when I grew up. And I would say it's probably, I'm more confident in who I am today than I ever have been. And every day I become more confident in who I am. But, I think I've told you this story that when I was at Penn State, I was part of an organization and volunteer group. We gave tours of campus, which, by the way, I think I gave tours to over 10,000 people while I was at Penn State.
I don't know how you don't have woo, but you pulled it off without woo. Much positivity.
I loved it. It was fun. I loved it. But I was the president of the organization, and one time I overheard some donors at an event speaking about me and some of the previous leaders of the organization. President who was before me was Hawaiian. The president before him was a woman. Or sorry, I think president before me was a woman. The president before her was Hawaiian. And so they made a derogatory comment about essentially implying, where are the people that look like them?
Yeah, exactly.
This organization,
white folk,
for lack of a better term, and it was jarring. You would think it shouldn't be. I went to high school with a bunch of white people. I went to Penn State.
The first time you've heard a comment like that in your life.
Yeah. But it was the first time that I was like, oh no, this is actually about me. And I realized this is a moment where it actually validated, I could have gone in two different ways. I could have shrunk from it, or let it affect me forever, or it validated one of the reasons I actually went to Penn State, as crazy as this sounds, was I wanted to go to a big school uh, that was full of people who did not look like me,
And
because I knew the world I was going to navigate was going to be a bunch of people that were not like me. Like the high school I went to had 5 Indian kids in it or something like that. I did not go to the Little India
yeah.
high school in Jersey. I went to
So
one
you
of the other
you
ones.
knew you were going to step in. You had a story of stepping into a world that didn't look like you or had the same experience as you.
Yeah. So I think that was the first time where I was like, okay, this is real. Like this
Mhm.
is getting real now. And I would say I don't want to say I struggled, with my identity. Over time, I just became more comfortable with, hey, this is who I am. This is
Mhm.
what I believe. This is what's important to me. And it got to the point where I was like, if other people don't feel that way, that's fine. Like they
Yeah.
can feel the way they feel. Doesn't make
Yeah.
me wrong. It doesn't
Right.
make them right. I'm gonna do what's important to me, and never doing it in a way that's imposing my beliefs or anything like that on anyone else. But I think it allows me to be who I am. Actually, our CEO Matt Henry gave me one of the biggest compliments I've been given in a long time recently. He texted me. He's like, "Hey, were you at this restaurant the other day?" I was like, "Yeah, I was there." Like, it's a random question to ask.
Yeah. It's a random question.
And he said, "Yeah, one of his daughter's friends was working behind you know, she was the hostess,
Right.
and like, yeah, and she reached out to me and said, you were like super nice, and talked to her and all this other stuff, and I think Matt's comment was something of like, it's impressive how you're always the same person no matter where you are or who you're with, and
Yes.
I hadn't really thought about that, but I was like, I mean, it's a lot easier to be the same person, no matter
Yeah.
where you are, than to be someone different in different situations, is
But I
what I
think
found.
what you're describing though is so key in the fact that even in a story I'm thinking about how people become more confident and how they step into it is that moment when you overhear the donor or whoever it was that time making a comment back in the day in college. I have a sense of myself enough to know like, hey, that thing being said about me isn't true. I think the only way that works is if well, that doesn't match who I am. That doesn't match the assumptions they're making about me. Oh, they're assuming that I have this because of that. They're assuming this because I look the way I do and my skin color is the color it is. And this is what like to know I'm like, you have to have the baseline to know that the world isn't seeing you, which then allows you to go, they're never in my head. They're never going to see me. I know what I am.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
that's well
how I
put.
show up. I can be me all the time. They may get it. They may not get it. But that's what I love about you is you're like, yeah, I'm me everywhere. And I think if people can tap into, I don't need to worry about how they see. I simply need to worry about what I see. And they may or may not see me at times in varying degrees.
And I realize you just can't control how people interpret who you are or what you bring.
Yeah.
They're going through their own stuff. They've had their own experiences. They have their own filters, just
Yeah.
like I have mine. You have yours.
Yeah.
And so, to me, I've learned, don't take things personally.
Yeah.
It's not about you. It's probably just as much about them. Be who you are, and just stay who you are. And if you're authentic about it, then 20 years
Totally.
later, I'm still telling, 30 years later, or whatever it's been, I'm telling this story. I have no idea who this person is. This person has no idea they've had this impact on me.
Yeah.
They're part of my, my journey. But, all we can really control is what we do in any
Yeah.
moment.
So I think, that again, that's the big challenge I think too. It's like having tools that you know how to wield well. Like if Clifton Strengths themes are simply tools in our toolkit, and we wield them better or worse depending on how healthy we are. Relational themes are so powerful because we can read and feel and sense people's emotional reactions and responses. The dark side is when our brain convinces us that it's our responsibility to manage that or control that or impact that. And I had someone say to me the other day is that I was like, well, I think I was saying to a coach or a therapist, somebody in a group setting, we were having a professional conversation. I said, it's so hard to realize, I'm a people pleaser, they would say. Somebody else said they're a people pleaser. And this therapist said, oh, people pleasers are the most manipulative people in the world. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, people pleasers are real manipulative. And she's like, I was a people pleaser and I'm working through it. I'm recovering. I said, how are they manipulative? They're just people pleasing. They're giving up their opinion. And she said, no, they're really trying to control how I see them by trying to please me. They aren't just pleasing because it does the best for everybody. They're actually trying to please because they want something. They believe they can control my emotional response to them. And then and one of the things I've realized for myself, and as I'm talking to clients, is this idea of nobody thinks they're doing it wrong. No
Yeah.
person who was wrong ever thought they were wrong before the moment they figured out they were wrong. And so no one thinks, and so no one, people are we're focused on ourselves that they aren't really paying attention to you. They're trying to be right. They're trying to do what they think is, and while we're in the wake of each other, it's not really about each other most of the time. And if that's the case, I can find the freedom of going, I can be confident that they don't see me, but I can still show up as me. And it'll work for some people, and it won't necessarily work for others in so many
Yeah.
different ways.
Yeah. That makes sense. A phrase I've often said, and I've probably even said it to you, is everyone is the hero of their own story.
Exactly.
And that is so true. Like we are as well. And so I find, why not just be who you are? Everyone's story is
Yeah.
going to be what it's going to be. So may as well be who you are and not have the mental tax at a minimum. And this is the logical part of my brain, the engineer.
Right.
Why try to remember, like, oh, with Mike, I act this way, and with this other person, I act this way. Like, it's so much easier to be who you are so that you can spend your time on things that really make a difference in your life.
Yeah. And I think, and what I love too, even going back to the very beginning of our conversation, of this idea of who it is you're being doesn't have to be a static idea, but instead of like, I am this and I'll always be this, it can be a person who's in a posture of, I'm going to be someone who's always growing. I'm going to be someone who's always, developer. I'm going to be someone who's optimistic, positivity. Ranger, I'm going to naturally believe you can work it out. Learner, I'm going to try to figure things out. Human beings matter to me. And it's a flux state. The developer part that goes, my commitment's to growth, not to being one thing. It's about trying to grow versus being a single thing in some ways. I think that posture is a special gift for those with a developer like yourself.
Yeah, it makes navigating change much easier. Not necessarily easy, but much easier, because the North Star is, at least for me, the North Star is, okay, how do I get better?
Right.
And as you've told me, and I've experienced this, when I don't get better at something, it gets really frustrating.
Yes.
And we're going backwards is
Yes.
very frustrating.
Yes.
But generally, it's, whenever a change has happened, whether in professional or personal life, it's always focused on, okay, well, how do I get better as a result of this?
Mm-hmm.
How do I become a better version of whatever it is that I want to be? And if I found it very rare that there's zero path to becoming better. In any set of situations, there's always some path. It's not always the most clear, but there's always a path that I found that, that I can say, oh, here's the way in which I can use this moment to become better at A or B or C or whatever the case might be.
A couple of things. What's interesting to me is that I find in clients telling me their stories, and even ones I've worked with long term, there's an evolution, right? Especially with developer, arranger, and learner in your profile. There's an initial part of, hey, I want to grow and learn to become. Then they kind of evolve to, I want to actually gain a posture and be the goal isn't the destination or result. The goal is the growth. But then the third evolution is, I'm still committed to growing, but I constantly evolve and grow my measure of what growth means. Like, what is the measure of growth? How, even this last decade for you, or the last 5 years, you have 2 great children and you're married, and your role at the company is different now than it was 5-10 years ago. How, for you, as someone who's committed to growth, how have you noticed your measure of what growth looks like in yourself changed? And what are the new measures for yourself as you're looking forward?
Oh, man, I've never thought about this question. Because
We talk about everything else all the time, brother. I had to drop the one we've never talked about.
So I'd say, okay, so let me start professionally. A decade ago, it really was. I think you nailed it well. It was, how can I grow? How can I grow, a team or make a bigger impact? But really, like the hat I wear every day that I think about is, what do we need to enable our firm to have the biggest impact on our clients that we can? How are we going to grow that impact? And the purpose of that is really to enable our clients to be better. So my day is spent thinking about talking to clients, thinking about what their needs are, learning, exploring what else is out there. And again, the stage isn't, how do I get better? What I have to do is it's kind of a byproduct of, we say, oh, we should think about this new service.
Yeah.
Okay, who's going to think about that new service? Like, probably me.
Somebody should.
So let me do some research. Like, how does this service work? Or what are the needs? Or who can I call to learn more? Or what, chat GPT or other tools should I use to get smart on this? But the platform it's a more significant platform. It's not making 4-digit decisions. It's making 8, 9, 10-digit decisions, right?
Yeah.
For the company. On the personal side, two teenage daughters. I think all the amazing things that come with that, and some of the more challenging things that come with that. I've been married for a long time to my wife. We've been together for a long time. Uh, I think for me, it's gone from, okay, well, this first, like, what's it mean to be a good partner, a good
Yeah.
husband? My wife's an ER doc. How can I be supportive of her career and what she's trying to do? Being a good role model as a dad for, in a household full of girls, even our dog is a girl. So we've got the only guy in the house.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
there's some role modeling and things that, again, way beyond ourselves. But I think, I think the other way in which it's grown is that, what is the impact that we are making on the world? As what impact am I making as an individual? What impact are we making as a family? What impact are we making as an organization that will outlive whatever it is that we're doing, on a random Tuesday afternoon in April, right? And I think that impact has come down to me over the last decade of figuring out what's important and passionate to me, that I care about, and what's the
Yeah.
impact that our family can make. But that's not something that I was spending a lot of time thinking about 5 or 10 years ago. Maybe it's Maslow's hierarchy. A lot of other needs are met, and now I get to think about, what the bigger opportunity is for us to make an impact. But I feel really blessed to be able to do that.
It's so interesting. I was talking to someone this weekend about this, that I think there's someone who wrote a book called Falling Upwards. And it's this concept of two halves of life, and how we spend the first half of our life building a container, and then we spend the second half of our life filling the container. And our challenge can be is that some of us don't realize that building the container isn't the whole life. Like, we come to the middle and we fail to realize that there comes a part where you're like, the container has to be maintained, obviously. It's a container. We're going to keep pouring things into. It's like
Yeah.
pottery. So you need to make sure cracks don't grow and it doesn't dry out too much. But you stop trying to build to it. You stop adding to it. Stop trying to make it bigger. And I think, one, we fail to realize when that moment comes. So we don't quite grow past the container creation. And then it's a shift of, well, wait a minute. I have a platform. I have a role. I have my finances, or I have my nest egg. And now I pour meaning and relationships and value into this container. What's interesting to me is I'm finding this conversation's happening earlier and earlier. People are going, wait a minute, I thought my job was going to be so meaningful and it's not. And instead of discovering it at 50, they're having this conversation at 35, which I don't think is unexpected given the change, but they're like, this isn't fulfilling me the way I thought it did. I saw Simon Sinek this morning on an Instagram talk about how corporations demand loyalty, but yet they would have to let go of them if the numbers didn't play out. Yeah. Even our understanding of the words like loyalty and relationship, like that's a whole thing. And so this idea of building a container and pour it in as you shift, and I hear that in you, is even that this big going, hey, we have this container of a life, children, family, role. Hey, what do we now pour into it in new ways for the second half?
Yeah. And I don't think it's actually quite that digital where you're pouring and then you're taking out. I think there's a way, and the more I've been really blessed and fortunate to be able to line up my life in such a way that these things there's always some conflicts that come up between these things from time to time. Like, you can't be everywhere all at once, but the more aligned they are, the easier it is to be doing something that is both positive for your company and positive for the community, or positive for your clients and positive for the firm. Like, these are not things that I view as in conflict with one another, or at least I have not felt in my life that they're in conflict with one another. Yeah. Whether that's good fortune or good design, I don't know. But either way, like, I feel like we can do good while growing, while making an impact. And it doesn't have to be this switch that like a, digital on-off switch.
Yeah. It's not a moment it's suddenly flipped. I think it's different. I think it's different areas of our life. I think, you can keep building the container of physical health. Like, it's not binary. This is the one thing or the other. Two last pieces before I steal too much of your time. I know you've got to go. Go take care, be at home as needed for Anisha. Two things. One, when you think about in the life you've navigated, and this idea that if you look back and you're like, yeah, this was something that distracted me that I was glad I outgrew. That, it could have been in the early days. It could have been going back to college, or something you realize now you're like, yeah, I really cared about this in the early days of my career and I went past and distracted me. And I could have followed it down the track, but man, I was able to recalibrate. Does anything come to mind?
This might be the engineer in me. I've been pretty good about not being distracted in my life. This may sound funny, but I went to Penn State, which is a pretty good party school, and I don't drink. And I like in some ways, I realized like going to Penn State would be a big test of how
Yeah.
disciplined I would be
Okay.
around it. And so, like I said, it hasn't always been done by design, but I think for the most part, I've known for a long time that I wanted to be someone who did things that I cared about, that mattered, that I was growing at, that I was the kind of person that I would look back on my life, and hopefully others would too. But I would look back on my life in those final moments and be like, hey, you know what? I'm really proud of who I was and how I did all those things. I wasn't right all the time. I wasn't
Yeah.
perfect. And when those moments came of like, would I be proud about this or not? That's always been my North Star. Like, maybe I wouldn't be so proud if
Yeah.
I did X, Y, and Z. So maybe I
Yeah.
just won't do that. So I think the biggest part of it might be, it's really hard, especially for me, but there are times when you have to move on from people and
Mhm.
relationships that might not be positive
Yeah.
for what you were trying to be.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's again, with empathy, that's really hard for me to
Yeah.
do, but
You believe in people,
uh,
but either you've outgrown them or they need a different voice or something
yes.
changes. That can be a thing. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really good. I just love it. I can hear your futuristic top 10. So the mix of futuristic and developer, I can see how that keeps you on track. Okay, last question on this one though. As we step into, we've been talking about North Star, and it's kind of this concept, right? With compass in general, is cardinal points that don't change. I love the idea of stars because the reality is we track by them a lot of times, old navigation, but we're tracking something that is shining light from a place that's far, far away. When you think back, somebody, it doesn't have to be a Chatham, but if you look back in your life, you're like, you know what? This is a person who, in my head, keeps coming up as an individual that I've been able to calibrate and think about and even be encouraged by. And it kind of cast a light from far away, but it has been something to help you navigate to where you are today. Who comes to mind?
Oh, it's super easy. It's got to be my parents. So my parents moved to the U.S. From India over 50 years ago, searching for a better life for themselves, and they weren't married yet, but they, got married when they got here,
Yes.
and a better life for their kids. The sacrifices, think back to the 70s.
Yeah.
Communication. Now you can now communication is super easy, and if someone
Right.
doesn't get back to you at the drop of a hat,
Yeah.
you're like, what are they doing, right?
Yeah.
How come am I not important? How come they're not getting back to me?
You're leaving your world and your
Then
home and you're there. There's nothing.
your family, like everything,
Mhm.
and it is not easy to get back. It's not cheap to get back.
Yep.
And the sacrifices that they made, which certainly led to, I think that they've had a great life here, but that also has enabled my sister and I to have the lives that we've had and the opportunities that we've had. Super fortunate, and never hung over us like the sword of Damocles. Like, look what we did for you. Now you do this. It was never
Pay it back.
that. It was just, I mean, it's that first generation immigrant American, thing that I think no matter where your parents are from, I suspect a lot of us feel similarly that we're grateful for the opportunities and the sacrifices they made and to grow up in this country, which can't deny. I mean, the opportunities
Opportunity.
for someone growing up in this country, in America, are
Constant opportunity.
tremendous. It is so much.
Yep.
It's never like, oh, I should do this to honor my parents, but it's always been there. It's always something that I've known that they made these sacrifices, and I will live up to my end of that bargain.
So good. I think it's a gift. Even again, having the story, having that model, having that. I tell people we can't create a vision for the future we can't imagine, and so the gift of people who took risks, they change our imagination like that is pretty profound. So it's a big
Yeah.
deal. Man, you've been an incredible partner and supportive. You've always supported the foundation and been a good friend and client. And I can't thank you enough for making time for me today and sharing the wisdom of what it means to be focused on growing and like not losing the humanity in the leadership of what can be a very intense finance and corporate world.
I mean, what do we do this for if not for the opportunity to work with good
Yeah,
people to make an impact? Like,
absolutely.
but Mike,
Wow.
always fun to chat with you, and I'm
Yes.
glad we got to do this together.
Thanks so much for having me here. If you're following along at home, it means all the important things we need from you. We need you to like, share, 5-star, all that other stuff. Also, if you have a comment or question, please tack it in below. You'll also find we have Fit Forum now, which is an online community using Clifton Strengths to help you find a fit for the 5 areas of well-being in your life. Love to have you join there. All it takes, Clifton Strengths Top 5. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys on another episode.